Well, hello and welcome to the Profit Express. I'm Tim Healy, and I'm inviting you to join me each and every week so together we can win the battle for business. That's right, we do it here and only here on the Profit Express. So, hey, as always, thanks for sharing some of your time with me today. Now, if you're like me and you care about the food you eat, you care about the environment, and you love learning and earning from successful entrepreneurs, then certainly join me on today's conversation with my guest. He is Stephen Skrenta. He's the owner of Acabonac Farms, which is a farm on the eastern end of Long Island. And it's a livestock farm that practices regenerative farming. So not only is his livestock healthier, does it taste better, he's regenerating the environment as he's raising his livestock. And while he's doing all of that, he's also competing against four of the biggest behemoths in the beef industry. That is the Cargills, the Tyson, the JBSs of the world, who, believe it or not, control 80 to 85% of the beef production in the U.S. Now, listen, if you're like me and you've given any thought to the food that we have on our typical shelves in typical supermarkets in America, some of that beef and chicken and pork, I don't know about you, but I think it's pretty scary. So to be able to have a conversation with a local regenerative farmer here on Long Island, I said, hey, you know what? I got to do it. I can't wait for it. So welcome aboard the Profit Express. Stephen Skrenta, again, owner Acabonac Farms. How are you today, Stephen?
Very good. Thank you for having me, Tim. It's a pleasure to be with you.
No, listen, my pleasure. There's a lot going on in the U.S. with farms, with regenerative versus corporate, and we do it on the Profit Express. I always love to get the story behind how you're doing it and the lessons learned. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. So let's start with that. What is the story behind Acabonac Farms? How did you get started?
Well, in 2015, we started Acabonac. I started thinking about the business and the business model about a year prior to that. And the thought was that we would bring local, regeneratively produced beef to our local community, which is Long Island. And since our farms are, 50, 60 miles outside of New York City, major markets being Manhattan, northern New Jersey, Connecticut, Long Island, Brooklyn, Queens, and be able to ship our product directly to our customer's home. So that was the idea, and the execution was to raise the animals. At the time we started, was just grass-fed and finished beef, to raise the animals regeneratively. So that meaning on regeneratively farmed forage.
Okay, so we've used the word regenerative a few times. So we have the typical listener, the typical business owner, typical American listening. From your perspective, how would you compare regenerative farming versus, I mentioned some of the big four, the Tysons of the world, where they have the mass-produced beef that most Americans see on, 99% of the shelves in supermarkets. So how do you compare the two, Stephen?
So I think what I would do is I'd separate if we're just talking about beef for now,
Sure.
We separate the animal's life sort of in two. One is when the calf is with its mother and they're both consuming grass on a ranch. Conventional would be when that calf is weaned or stripped from its mother and brought to a feedlot where it is grown out to a finishing weight on a very high energy or high sugar diet, mostly of grains, in particular, corn. The alternative would be to keep the calf on grass and have it consume forage for the entirety of its life and have it finish or fatten out on forage. And in that regard, the animal would be grass-fed and grass-finished. which promotes a healthier animal, which promotes a healthier muscle, so a healthier protein that we consume. Um, the regenerative part is how we care for the pastures.
Mm-hmm.
So think about a conventional farm in America. The vast majority of farms in America are conventionally farmed, where there's a lot of plowing and tillage and use of herbicides and pesticides and synthetic fertilizers to build fertility. Um, that's a conventional approach. A regenerative approach would be entirely the opposite of that. To first and foremost promote activities on the farm that allow us to grow soil health, so that our soils and our soils alone are able to grow ultra healthy forages, which in turn grow ultra healthy animals, which
Mm-hmm.
produce ultra healthy proteins for us to consume.
All right. Now
And I
here's
can go
here's
into
a
some of
silly
the
question.
regenerative practices.
Let me interject for just a second. How we're talking about soil, and that's part of the regenerative process. How important? Maybe it's a dumb question. I don't know. How much impact does soil have on the end product?
Well, I mean, think of it this way. I guess the question that I always ask customers, especially those that come and join me on the farm, is, where does health come from?
Mm-hmm.
Like what produces health for us as humans? And you could say, well, exercise and sleep and um, fresh air, fresh water.
Sure.
But inevitably, it's going to be a diet, right? And so diet does matter. It matters to us, which is why an increasing number of U.S. consumers are choosing a grass-fed and finished beef product, right? Because their diet matters to their health, and
Sure.
they're beginning to realize that the approach, perhaps, of the traditional Western diet isn't doing it for them from a health perspective. And so, if our diet matters to us, then I don't think it takes much to believe that the diet of the animal that we're consuming matters to it, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
the health of the forage that the cattle are eating matters quite a lot to its health. And if you wanted to take it one step further and say, well, what's the diet, if you will, of the forage? Where is it getting its um, minerals and nutrients?
Mm-hmm.
And it's getting it from the soil. And so you say, well, if it starts at the soil, what's promoting soil health? Because that's what the foundation of the forage health, the animal health, and ultimately our health is. And in a conventional setting, you're really quickly going to, get to bags and bags of synthetic fertilizers. Um, and so if you're okay with a diet that was built upon a foundation of synthetic fertilizers, well, that's a conventional, Western diet. If you're interested in very, very productive soil, growing the forage that ultimately grows your food
Mm-hmm.
in an unassisted manner, unassisted by any kinds of synthetic fertilizers or herbicides or pesticides, then soil health matters a lot.
It's funny the way you put it. Just as the listener, and again, myself, my wife, my family, we do take our food seriously, right? Our nutrition seriously. That's part of the reason you're on the show, right? And your local Long Island farm, the Profit Express, is based here on Long Island. But the way you said it was, hey, if you're okay, the way I'm paraphrasing, but if you're okay eating fertilizer, then hey, that's a traditional Western diet. Go right ahead. Um, and it's just it's kind of sad that that's what it's come down to, and that's probably you know 90% of what people are consuming is going to be in that sort of, or raised in that sort of an environment, I have to believe, right?
It wasn't always like that. I mean, prior to World War II, the prevalence of synthetic fertilizers and certainly herbicides and pesticides much lower. Family farms produced our food in America and on Long Island. And these were integrated farms. So these farms had livestock and they had cash crops and they had fruit and there were forests and there were rest periods and they all sort of worked together. And once, our government started subsidizing certain cash crops like corn, we needed to move that corn someplace. And so we could move it through an animal and very inexpensively fatten it very quickly in a feedlot. So we move the animal to a feedlot, we move the corn to the feedlot, and very predictably and very inexpensively, we can fatten that animal. And so it drove down the price of beef, but it also had a lot of unintended consequences, environmental and human health and animal health perspective. And so when you bring the animals back onto the farm and you think about how to use and work with Mother Nature as opposed to against Mother Nature, and this isn't anything new, it's actually a bit of a back to the future, right? It's exactly the approach that we used prior to World War II in America.
Right.
You begin to farm in a way that actually benefits the environment, better benefits the Long Island water table, benefits air quality, produces a healthier protein, produces a healthier human, and it does it locally. So it's it's being done, if you will, in your backyard by farmers that and you can go and visit and you can speak to and ask your questions to. That in its entirety promotes a much healthier environment for us all.
Now, when did this shift? You said it was basically when the government started to subsidize crops, corn in particular, that we start to see that shift towards, I guess, industrialization of farming and livestock. Was that around, was it the 50s or so that started to happen in the U.S.?
Yeah.
It wasn't about the 50s. Okay.
Yeah. And that, that is something that, if years ago, if you were to ask nations around the world who, they want to aspire to be like when it comes to agriculture, it was the United States. And over the years, they began to see that approach to, raising your food, whether it's a carrot or a tomato or a chicken or, a lamb, they realized that those unintended consequences were damaging the environment, damaging human health, not good for the animals. And now you see an increase in pasture-based communities that raise their food in an integrated way, similar to the way that we do it, because consumers are beginning to demand it again, right? They'd rather spend a little bit more for their food than a lot of money down the road for medicines,
for healthcare. I laugh, but you're 100% right. Now, so we're talking about fertilizer and the corporate farms that are using fertilizer to care for their soil. So, are you saying Acabonac doesn't use synthetic fertilizers to care for and nurture your soil?
No, we don't. Because we've brought livestock back onto our farms, and because we graze the animals, and all the animals that we raise are raised on our pasture. So we raise grass-fed beef, we raise grass-fed lamb, pastured chicken, and pastured pork. All of those animals are integrated into rotations across our pastures. And as we rotate the animals, their fertility, so manure and urine and their grazing action, combined with our skill around resting the pastures until they come back again, allow us not to need synthetic fertilizers. So it's not that I have an issue with them necessarily. It's just our business model doesn't require them, because we've brought animals back onto the farm and we manage them in a way to provide the fertility, right, that other farms, more conventional farms, don't have access to, right? So they need to provide fertility. They need their carrot to be able to grow somehow. And so they had to put down bags of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. We don't have to do any of that because the animals are doing it for us under our management.
So it's essentially as nature intended, and it started basically as humans started farming and raising livestock thousands upon thousands of years ago. And it's really in that, it's evolved obviously, but that's the model that you're following. Am I right in saying that?
Started before that, because it's the way that Mother Nature works, right? If you were to think about herds of buffalo sort of grazing across the Great Plains, right? They would go in massive herds and consume the forage and layer a significant amount of manure and urine, and they wouldn't return to. And once they consumed the forage, they would move on and continue to consume forage, and they wouldn't return to that area again until the next season or even beyond, giving the land a chance to rest and absorb and benefit from their grazing action and their fertility. And every time that happened, it would grow back stronger. And so that's the way that Mother Nature has worked well before we certainly were, around. And Acabonac Farms, Acabonac is an indigenous word. It's a word used by the Algonquins, and they understood this concept very, very, very well. It means root place, the place where roots are grown. And Long Island has very fertile soils if they're treated properly. They're thin soils, so it's sandy soils, but they grow forage very, very well, and high sugar forage, which does a great job in raising livestock.
Now, I asked you when we started, Stephen, again, today's guest, Stephen Skrenta, he's the owner of Acabonac Farms out here on Eastern Long Island, livestock farm, regenerative farm. I asked you about this story, but I don't know if I missed it. Were you always in farming? Did you grow up in farming? Okay, so how did you, because it's not an easy profession. I'm just kind of guessing. Obviously, I don't know. It looks like it would be a tough, demanding profession. Is it a bit of a calling? How did you find yourself into this way of life?
My background's in finance. And of course, right? What would you expect? That makes perfect sense. The idea that Americans are beginning to relook at what they're eating and where it comes from, right? So what is it that they're eating? Meaning, how is it grown? What actually is in the meat that they're eating, for instance? Are there antibiotics? Are there growth hormones? So what are they eating, and where does it come from? Where does it come from? Increasingly so, Americans are, there's a level of distrust around our food system. Labeling laws have been relaxed, and labels generally have been bastardized to the point where people have really lost trust. Marketing is very confusing for us. I mean, Coca-Cola would have you believe that their product is healthy. If you look at their commercials, I mean, fantastic. So sugar is very, very tempting, right? So when you combine all that stuff, it's very hard to know as a parent or as an individual looking to better yourself. And so an important and growing trend in the United States is individuals relearning what they're eating and where it comes from, and that's an important trend. And I wanted to be part of that trend, and I thought that it would be great to do on a local agricultural land on Long Island. That's one. Two, I don't know if you've ever driven by small local farms, whether it's in Pennsylvania or upstate New York or wherever it may be, but I don't think it's much of a stretch to kind of conclude that a small local farm and its business model is strained. And so if I could apply some of what I know from business and finance, maybe to assist in improving upon some of the business models that do exist for small local farmers, that would that would be quite good for us.
So you just mentioned a lot that I would like to dive into. The labeling is misleading, things like natural flavors and all these, ways that, companies can get around what's really in the food you eat. And it's funny, it was COVID, on just in a personal note, where everybody's kind of locked up watching podcasts, and for me, Joe Rogan and Netflix and all these series. And I got a real unfortunate education on things like food, seed oils, farms, all of this. And it caused me and my family, as I said earlier, to kind of re-examine what we're eating. I take it very seriously. But so I guess the trend then is you're seeing more people who are requesting it, who want to be aware of what they're actually eating, which in turn would be good for business. But here's the question for you then. How does somebody like yourself, again, earlier in the intro, I mentioned, the 4 big producers who have 85% of the market in Cargill and Tyson, for example. How does a farm like Acabonac market and brand itself?
Well, what's important to our customers is that we're honest and transparent about what we do and how we do it. Right? Certainly, we're not flawless. Right? Regenerative doesn't mean that on the day that we open, we're perfectly healthy. Right? We're farming conventional land that over years will take to build soil health and repair. Right? That's a journey. That's one. Two, local. It's very important. Right? Why? Because it's really hard to trust unless you can, go and kick the tires or pick up the phone and speak to me about our approach to raising our pastured chicken. Why do you need to supplement chicken on pasture with grains, for instance? Or what does it mean to be grass-fed and finished? Is it different than grass-fed? What does it mean to be pastured? What is pasture? What kind of grass do you grow? What kind of breeds? Does it matter what kind of breeds you raise? So there are all these questions that as you begin to re-engage with what you're eating and where it comes from, you have. Why? Because we don't learn that. None of us. And if you're on Long Island, you probably have never seen a cow in your life. Right? It's not like it's not like a very agricultural area anymore. I mean, yes,
it used to be, but not anymore. Yeah,
it used to be, but not anymore. And so, understanding what you're eating and where it comes from is a process where you need to re-engage and re-educate yourself. And I would say, having access to that, in particular around a time in your life where you have had a health event. Now, it doesn't necessarily need to be, a health event for you specifically, but it could be a loved one or it could be a child, grandparent, what have you. And at some point you realize, what is causing this? Where does health come from? How do I better myself? in terms of, I do not want to be dependent upon, several drugs for the rest of my life. I would like to
Right.
support local farms that support our local environment, our water table, or our. I would like to see green spaces, and I would like farmers to be part of our community. And so that's the way we tend to market ourselves. That because that's what people want.
Now, the amount of, if you look at it from a business perspective, and you have a finance background, so you certainly understand business, you understand finance. Not that you're competing against Cargill, you can't. They are massive. You're a local farm. To begin to champion your cause, to get the word out, the message out, to re-educate consumers, the reality is Acabonac can only feed so many people, right? If you compare it to the volume that a Cargill or a Tyson is putting out. And so here's my question. Are we at a point in America, because you hear time and again, foreign entities, non-farming entities buying farmland in the U.S., data centers eating up farmland in the U.S. Is it too late to really create enough of a groundswell with people like you to make a difference?
If you dial back 30 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and you're let's say you're Anheuser-Busch, right? And you hear about a microbrewery, and you think, this is a joke.
Right.
How is it ever that a microbrewery is going to be able to compete against the few major beer companies in the United States? If you fast forward 30 years, you can see what microbreweries have done to the big breweries and what they had to do in order to compete with the microbreweries. Why? Because that's what consumers wanted.
Great
Really
okay.
Perhaps to answer your question best, it's up to the consumer, right? Because if you're farming in a way that is consistent with the way that Mother Nature works, well, frankly, you're going to win, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're never going to beat Mother Nature, right? We escaped a storm this past week, right? But
yeah.
But you know what happens when we don't? It's devastating.
Yeah.
And so, you can continue to work against Mother Nature. You can continue to plow a tremendous amount of money into steel that moves soil, and synthetic fertilizers that provide fertility, and proteins that are loaded with things that are damaging our health. You can continue to do that, but at some point, consumers say no more, right? And you can see that in numbers coming out of some of these big companies that promote unhealthy foods. So, for instance, Coca-Cola and Pepsi, look at what they're doing to their portfolios. Look at the companies that they're buying. Look at the way, and I don't know, the ages of children around, you and your home, but mine won't eat McDonald's. There's no way. I mean, when I was young, it was like the greatest treat ever.
Yeah.
But now, if I, there's no way that they're, and so consumers, as those, trends evolve, think about it the other way, Tim, from a business perspective. What does the 3.5 or 4 massive beef companies, protein companies in America, how are they going to compete against us? Right? Because they don't have farms. They're not built to provide healthy proteins, they're not local. They don't have the connections that we do to our local customers. They're not adding to our local communities in terms of employment and soil health and water quality, et cetera. They're not doing that. And so, well, just as Budweiser couldn't compete against at some point those microbreweries, things change, and I believe that this will change the way that we eat.
So, not to use the finance pun, but it sounds like you're kind of bullish on the opportunity here because the consumer is driving it, and again, the analogy was great. I never thought of it that way. The microbreweries versus Anheuser-Busch, and we see the evolution of microbreweries in the past 20 years or so. So do you feel confident there'll be a similar sort of trajectory with regenerative farming in the U.S.?
I think if I were smarter and probably not as ambitious, I just would have shorted McDonald's stock. Right? That would have been much easier, right?
Yeah.
The second part to what I hope to do is, when you begin to use the animals to do the work. So just think about if you're a conventional farmer, let's say you're growing vegetables on Long Island,
right,
potatoes. Just think about how many people you need to do that, right? And think about where are you going to get those people today, and if you're able to get them, how much you're going to have to pay them.
Yeah.
And then think about your margins and how that all sort of works or doesn't. Think about a business model where, well, when the sun's up, everybody is already at work. Everybody gets up and starts harvesting, right? These are the animals that we have. They don't get sick. They work, from sun up until sundown. You don't have to pay them. They do a flawless job every day. Then I don't have to pay for all this fertility, right? I don't need to buy bags and bags and bags of nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium. Proteins, and we're unique in that we're doing it locally, and so there are all these things that make this business model pretty interesting, but none of it would be possible unless we had Amazon come to market years and years ago, right? Because what did they do? They basically rewrote the rules in terms of sending products directly to your home. They changed the way customers think.
Absolutely,
you didn't need to go out to Best Buy and get the computer anymore or the TV. You could have it at your house in a day or two. And then, some of the supermarkets started, delivering right to your home. And that consumer, the thinking around, okay, well, I don't need to be running out to the store 4, 5, 6 times a week. I could just have the stuff coming to me. When you do that as a farmer and you say, well, we could do that too. We could send our product directly to the consumer. We take out layers of the industry that capture our profit margin. And so we have to pay for fulfillment, right? I have to have a warehouse, and we have to pack the box, and we use dry ice, and we have to use a courier or UPS label, and that does eat away at our margin, but not like a distributor or a wholesaler, and then a retailer, and all these different layers, right? That leaves the farmer with nothing. We can send our product direct because Amazon changed the way consumers think. We have FedEx and UPS, which are fantastic at what they do and fairly cost efficient. We have shipping technology in terms of insulated liners that aren't bad for the environment, no more styrofoam and things like that. You have dry ice. And so we've gotten good at that over the years. And so we're able to capture that margin, right? So the production on the farm is very, very efficient because we're working with Mother Nature, and we're leveraging the technology that companies like Amazon and FedEx and UPS have developed to benefit us and allow us to continue to farm in areas that are really high in cost: labor, insurance, transportation. Just think about trying to get around the Eastern Long Island during the summer from a traffic perspective. I mean, it's not easy. So there are these things and there are business models that work in these environments. That's what I find very, very interesting about this business.
So it's
different business model than what they do in Montana.
The way you are describing the business, because I don't know regenerative farming, that's obviously why you're here in part, but the way you describe the business model, the expenses that you don't have compared to somebody who's growing carrots, for example, and you're not buying bags of nitrogen and potassium, you have, more going to your bottom line, more ability to make profit. So it's actually, I got to be honest, it's a more interesting business model than I thought it would be. So let's take a turn here for a moment, because a part of what the conversation has been about today has been the regenerative side, how it compares to corporate livestock, and also the consumer, and that the consumers are becoming more enlightened, more aware. I consider myself one of them, or at least I try to be as much as I can.
Yeah.
And we've been hearing a lot, especially with our new Secretary of Health, Kennedy, okay, and his big thing on vaccines. And I've read a lot, and I'm sure, you know infinitely more than I do, vaccines being used in livestock. What's your take on it? What should the consumer know? Because to me, quite frankly, it scares the hell out of me.
When did you start eating meat?
When did I start eating meat? Very, very early on in my life. Yeah, I don't know exactly when my mother, but yeah, my whole life essentially, right?
Okay, so your whole life. Well, you've been, so things are going okay so far, right? In terms of the proteins that you've been eating have been vaccinated, period.
When did it start? Was it always like that? Was it always like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
I didn't know.
Again,
okay.
Think about it. Yeah, think about it. It's conventional farmers. All farmers work on razor thin margins, and so if they're not protecting their animals from illness, right, and they lose a herd, or even if they lose one animal, that's pretty much their profit. And so you're not going to have, as you raise animals, right? There are protocols, and those protocols include vaccinations in the United States and beyond, period, right? So the world uses vaccinations in their livestock. The question is not whether or not have they been used? Yes, they have been used. Are they going to continue to use? I assume so, yes. Are they safe? Well, how's it going for you so far, right? I think the answer is yes, they're safe. Now, this is going to alienate 99.9% of my customers, but I'm just going to tell them the truth. I mean, with respect to properly vaccinated animals, and if you're using those vaccinations correctly, then yes, they're safe, right? Because they're not entering our food supply. Now, again, 99.9% of my customers would violently disagree with that. But as a farmer, I'm telling you, that's my belief. It's not necessarily what we do. We don't boost vaccines.
Right.
It's not because I have a problem with vaccines. Now, this is the crazy part, right? I don't have a problem with synthetic fertilizers as much as you think I would, right? After all this I don't have as much of a problem with antibiotics. Vaccinations in animals. All I'm saying is, if you're working in a way similar to the way that we do it, which is promoting first and foremost a healthy environment and a very healthy diet for the animal, right, in an unconfined setting with
Right.
fresh air and fresh water and a super healthy diet of forage, the animals don't need to be vaccinated. I don't need to spend the money. I don't. The risk profile of my herd getting sick is much, much, much lower on average because the environment that we're raising them in. So I don't
Now,
need it.
do you vaccinate your animals? Is it something you have to do by law? I'm unfamiliar with that.
No, you don't. No, you don't. I mean, like I said, we don't boost vaccines. We don't need to. Uh, if we did need to, I would send a note to my customers and tell them that we're going to, and they could decide whether or not they wanted to, buy elsewhere. But we just don't. We don't need to buy synthetic fertilizers,
So
so we don't.
it goes back to the environment from the very beginning, the
It goes back to
soil.
where do you
Yeah,
want to buy your food from, right?
yeah.
Do you want to buy your food from an organic farm that has a list of things that it cannot do, and so they won't do it, right? But they'll look for ways, some of them look for ways around those rules because they want to get their yields up. Or do you want to buy your food from a farm that doesn't need those things that make you nervous, right? That drive fear.
Mm.
Uh, and if you find a farm like that, I would definitely call and ask, well, what makes you different? What are you doing differently where you don't need that stuff? Because that's the real question, right? It's not what's on a label. It's engage with the topic, learn about it, and try to figure out, well, what are they doing differently there? Because that sounds great. But since we're all on Long Island and we know, as my mom used to say, a fugazi when we see it, right? Then you should make sure that you're comfortable with it and understand why this is something that they do not need.
You bring up
That's what I'm saying.
it's actually a very interesting perspective here. You just brought up organic, and we hadn't spoken about organic. We were speaking traditional and regenerative. Now, obviously, organic is popular. Organic's a buzzword. People pay for organic. Again, organic is also the premium. What's the difference between organic and regenerative? Do people
It's a
confuse the
long
two?
list.
What's the
It's a
easy
long
answer?
list. I'll give you an example or two, which is, can you use synthetic fertilizers on an organic farm? The answer is yes, you can. They just need to be organic. So what is that? Okay. Can you use herbicides or pesticides? So can you use herbicides on an organic farm?
Mhm.
Right? No. Well, unless they're on a list of approved herbicides for an organic farm. How are you working, right? So set aside the label, right? Because a certification is typically just something you buy, right? I mean, let's be honest. You bought it, okay?
Yeah.
So you're following a set of rules, right? In order to maintain your certification, whatever that certification is called, as opposed to, okay, well, let's start working today and never stop working for years and years and years to come on bettering the environment, right? So where is the limit to what we are going to do at Acabonac Farms in our journey being a regenerative farm? There is no limit. It's everything we do. We come in the morning and we prioritize first and foremost the promotion of soil health. Right? Once you do that, you really don't need to focus much on forage, right? Because it's going to be, and once you do that, right? You're not going to need to. We don't spend any time thinking, well, very little time thinking about our animals because they're perfectly healthy, right? They're growing really, really well. And so if you get the foundation right, the rest are byproducts of what we're really focused on are what are the things that we're doing not to screw up the growth of the health of our soils, which from my perspective is where true health comes from, right? And so if we get that right and continue that journey continuously, we don't necessarily need to worry about checking the box around a certification that we've effectively bought. But they're two very different mentalities. Um, um, so that's what I would say. That's how I would describe the difference between
the difference. So I don't want to simplify it. It's just my own interpretation. It begins and ends with the soil, it begins and ends with nature. And when you do that right, let the animals do what they do naturally.
Yeah, because if you believe that we, even with, the wisdom that we have as humans, know more about how nature works and its, infinite complexity, right? And true health, then I think you'd be wrong, right? Because we don't. And so let's just get out of the way and promote nature doing what it does best, which is providing health for us.
Well said. Let me take a bit of a turn here on the show. And again, today's guest, Stephen Skrenta, he's the owner of Acabonac Farms. They're a livestock farm out here in eastern Long Island. And we're talking about beef and business today here on the Profit Express. Couldn't help the alliteration. Stephen, share with the listeners, on the more business side. So you've been in business. You guys opened up in 2015. So you've been in business for a decade now. Congratulations there. As you know, it's not an easy feat. What would be a mulligan? I love to ask the mulligan question, a do-over. Looking back, if you could have a do-over in the business, what would it have been?
I wouldn't have started with beef.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, as a class, it's the animal that I like working with the most. But just in terms of capital efficiency, just in terms of investment in infrastructure, just in terms of learning curve, it's from a farming as well as a financial learning curve. It would be something perhaps easier would be a lamb or a chicken. Just the cash flow cycle is a lot shorter, and the capital intensity is a lot lower.
When you got into the business, again, you came from the world of finance, which is complete opposite ends of the spectrum, right? If you just have a visual of a farmer and somebody who's in finance. Did family tell you were crazy? Did family tell you you're out of your mind?
Yeah, and it's very embarrassing. Honestly, it's that's true. I had a really high opinion of myself.
If you do so, say.
True. And when you begin to fail, right, as an entrepreneur, you like, well, wait a second. I mean, so the money aside is my reputation here. It's like
ego. Yep.
This is not going to happen.
Right.
And if you want the real story as to why we produce a line of dog food, it's because I was failing. I mean, failing miserably. When you slaughter a cow, half of the animal is ground beef, right? 7 pounds of that animal is filet mignon. And so it doesn't take much to sell 7 pounds of filet mignon. But if you're going to have to sell 350 pounds of ground beef, you need to be really good. Especially because ground beef tends to be a loss leader in supermarkets, right? Just think about things like orange juice and eggs and ground beef, right? Where is it placed in the store and how do they price it? And so if you're a small producer like me and and you're producing the animal. So you're going to get that ground beef whether or not you want it, right?
Right.
You need to move a lot of it. And luckily for me, Americans seem more inclined to spend money or larger sums of money on a per pound basis on their dogs than their family.
Really?
Yeah, it's, I don't know about you, but we have a family dog, and I'm certain that my wife loves my dog more than me most days. I mean, that's just the way it is. And there's almost no limit to the the desire of people to spend on their pets. That's one. Two, kibble as a dog food is like 100 times worse than eating McDonald's 3 times a day as a human.
Really?
Right? It's just really bad. So if you can produce a super healthy dog food from our meat, that dog performs beautifully. I mean, the you know the dog's coat, the dog's poop doesn't smell, it doesn't have bad breath, it lives longer, it has more energy. And you say, well, it's Acabonac Farms, it's brilliant. No, I mean, okay, thank you, but it's just that we have really high quality protein, and the alternative kibble is really, really bad. So it's like, well, it doesn't take much to win.
When
It
did
does
you
take
introduce the dog food? When did that
well
product
right
hit the
around.
shelf?
It was quite lucky because it was right around. It was maybe a year or so before COVID, and so what happened during COVID? Everybody got a dog, and everybody wanted to make sure that they were doing things the right way.
Oh.
And we built this nice little. It's an important part to the business today, which is which allows us to which allows us to do a lot more things in terms of farming, because we have that recurring. You don't ask a dog every evening, and there's no discussion at your house as to what are we going to feed the dog tonight, right? But if I'm gonna go downstairs and there's going to be a discussion about what we're going to eat tonight, and so we'll figure it out. But the dog's going to get the same thing every night, and so it's every day, every week. We're sending, and the dog's performing really, really, really well, and it's a good business for us.
So the fact that people are more comfortable spending more on dogs than themselves or pets, they have higher levels of discretionary income, or at least willingness to spend that money. And in your case, your wife likes the dog more than you most days. So that makes a great business model.
I don't think I'm unique, by the way. I think this
well,
is
yeah. No
is the way
attack
it
on
works.
you, Stephen. Yeah. I don't have a dog, but if I did, I would probably be in the same situation as you. So that was a great business decision just around the COVID time then.
Well, we got lucky, and it was because I was in survival mode, right? Our storage facilities are, getting filled up with ground beef, and we had to do something, right? Because it's not as I can't price it below my production costs. I've got to add a little bit more value to it, and then move it in through a different channel, which is through a dog. And so that works, right? And it allows us to. What does it allow us to do? It actually allows us to produce more cattle, right? So if I don't have to worry as much about moving ground beef, I can raise another cattle beef and sell more filet mignon. And my profit margin on filet mignon and a ribeye steak and a New York strip steak is much, much, much higher than the loss leader ground beef. And so moving that volume and getting things going, it's, this is a unique issue for a local farmer, right? Because if you go to your butcher store, they're not raising the animal. They're
Right.
they're dialing up one of the big 3 or 4 beef producers and saying, send me subprimals, big muscles, and I'll just cut them at the butcher store. So they're not taking that. But if you're raising the animal, you get what the animal gives you, which is all the steaks, all the ground beef. And so the challenge is, and we're not we ship nationwide, but we don't have national distribution like, JBS or, one of these big firms. And so we need to build individual local markets for each of the cuts coming out of a lamb or a beef or a pig or a chicken.
Now, let me ask you, so what is it, 4th of July, Memorial Day, Labor Day, when you're at home with the family, what is Steve's favorite cut of meat to have on the grill?
My wife hates this. So I joke
No wonder
around.
she likes the dog more than you. I mean, come on, Steve.
I have 3 children.
Yep.
We all like steak, right?
Sure.
And we're not fussy about it, to be honest with you. I mean, a lot of it is just burgers. But for me, I have to say that there's one steak above all others, and that's a New York strip steak. I know that people are going to say, "Oh, it's a ribeye," or it's I love filet mignon, and I get that, right? But if you think about where the cut of where the muscle is coming from the animal. Mm-hmm. So if the muscle is doing work on the animal all day, just think about lowering and raising the head or moving the animal forward or backwards. That's going to be a very well-developed muscle. It's going to be tough.
Sure.
The trade-off is going to be very, very flavorful. Think about a muscle like tenderloin and filet mignon that sits sort of in the middle of the animal that doesn't do any work. It's going to be really soft, but the trade-off is not going to have a lot of flavor. You say, well, I have filet mignon all the time and it tastes great. Well, that's probably because of butter and salt, right? But the muscle itself isn't going to have a lot of flavor. New York strip steak sort of balances between those both. So it's got a bit of a bite. It's got really nice, if it's properly done, marbling. So it's got that intramuscular fat that gets its flavor. And we sell them at 16 ounce, which is for me the kind of the perfect size. As I get a little older, it's a little bit big, but for me that's the cut. So that's what we eat a lot of our own product there.
Well, certainly. Now, so you said your wife would hate you for saying that. What's Mrs. Skrenta's favorite?
Well, what I was going to say is because like I always fire up the kids, like we're we're just doing goofy stuff, like saying things like you just yelling beef and steak. We're just making a lot of jokes about how macho it is to eat big steaks. Right? It's like I don't know why we do. We just goof around, and so we'll have these silly conversations about what the best cut of steak is, but frankly, it's just really to to have fun. The idea that we're cowboys on Long Island is it's just a ridiculous thing if you think about it. I mean, let's be honest. It's just ridiculous. And so, we're always trying to convince ourselves that we're more macho than certainly we really are. And,
the former finance guy from Long Island, right? Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, let's be honest. It's like the Long Island Yellowstone or something. Like it couldn't be more different. I mean, we even have a policy on the farm where there's like no loud noises. Why? Right. Of course, we're not riding around on horseback hooting and hollering, and because that puts stress on our cattle. And when animals are stressed, they don't eat, and when they don't eat, we don't make any money.
Right.
When they get stressed, they get sick. I mean, so like it's sort of like just really gentle, tranquil, peaceful, quiet, no noise. They're just living in their environment, eating the perfect diet, drinking fresh cold water. It's like completely opposite of a Yellowstone. But we like to think we are, and so that makes it a little bit fun.
So, and this has been a very, very interesting conversation. You're the first, a cattle rancher, livestock farmer I've had on the show here at the Profit Express. So thanks for jumping on board today, Stephen. Again, a complete right turn from finance to raising cattle. I love the hustle and the pivoting and adding a dog food line during COVID, and hey, moving more ground beef and raising revenue and profits, which is great. Let me ask you this. So you've been in business 10 years.
Yeah.
Whether you retire and maybe the next generation of Skrentas takes the farm over, 20 years from now, whatever that timeline is, when you're about to hang up your cowboy hat, how do you want Acabonac Farms to be known?
I'd like it to be known as a place where, well, I should say that what I'm most proud about is that we are, we are working hard to figure out how to keep agriculture a part of Long Island, right? And so, if we're able to fend off another housing development or a strip mall, and we're able to
thank God, Steve.
And we're able to keep individuals learning about where their food comes from and how it's raised and where I believe health really comes from, then I think we will have done good for the community. That's a big part of it. I will tell you that over the last 2 or 3 years, increasingly so, what makes me most proud is that, we're the people that work with us at Acabonac Farms are beginning to build their own families and be able to afford to do the things that they want to do. I mean, it's far from perfect, right? We're a farm, so it's not like we're, have margins like Google or anything. But the point is that as an entrepreneur, as the owner of a firm, as an owner of a company, there's a certain amount of pride to that, and I feel that strongly. Like that to me is definitely a motivating factor, and so those are some of the things that I'd like people to recognize in Acabonac for hopefully years and years to come.
Let me throw you a curveball. So I love the fact that you said, again, I'm a Long Island native. If you could, push off the hordes of strip malls and more housing developments, God bless. I'm all for it. Because when you get, I live on Eastern Long Island, so once you kind of get, and you'll appreciate this, some of the listeners can as well. Once you get to Wading River, things start to change a little bit, and you come across that first. There's that buffalo farm out there, and then you start to see more farms. And my wife and I, we've gone out. You go to Greenport, wherever. There's a million great places out on the East End, and you feel like you're in another state. It's just beautiful, and I don't have to tell you that. You know that. But here, let me end it on this one.
Yeah.
You guys are growing, you're thriving, you're, just like you had the analogy of the microbrews in Anheuser-Busch. What if 10 years from now, Tyson comes to you with a giant check? What do you do?
My goal is that I would say you have to ask my employees, right? I mean, my goal would be that I would say talk to our shareholders, because they're going to make the decision, and those shareholders are the people that have built this farm, and those are the employees of Acabonac, and then they can make the decision that they want collectively, which is best for them. That is my hope. That is my hope. Now, if it were me, right, and I were 75 years old and none of my children wanted to take, the farm forward, I'd say write a big check. I mean, again, I'm it's like what? Okay, and everybody. I'm
That's
gonna guess
okay.
is
Yeah.
going to say this,
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome.
but the goal is really to give this business over time to the people that work at the company
Okay.
and allow them to decide to do what they want with it. Um, it's something that it's a business that you truly need to love what you do in order to do it well. And you
Yeah.
could say, well, that's the case with all businesses, but I would say that you could like working at Microsoft. You don't need to love working at Microsoft. You're probably going to do very well at Microsoft just because
Yeah.
Microsoft's doing very well, right? But if you're gonna if
To
you're
me, what
gonna
you do is more of a calling. If you ask my opinion, it seems to me more of a calling, in my opinion.
And that's why I think the business lends itself very, very well for being owned by the people that are working at it, right? Because if you have
Mm.
that calling and if you have that drive and if you have that discipline and you're willing to do the things that are required of a farmer,
Hmm.
right? Which isn't it's really just it's an around the clock job
Yeah.
that is all demanding, and it's not one skill set. It's an endless number of skill sets you need. Then the ownership structure should reflect what I believe would require that to be a success, and I think that's with the employees.
Awesome. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you sharing the story of Acabonac. Best and easiest way for people to learn about you, the products, follow you.
Yeah, Instagram. We spend a lot of money on, unfortunately, meta marketing. So you probably have seen us. If you have,
Yeah.
if you're even slightly interested in local farming or grass fed meat, I'm guaranteed you're bombarded daily with our advertisements on Instagram. Acabonacfarms.com. It's ACABONAC farms FARMS.com. And you know, give us a shot. And if you're on Long Island, it's it'll be at your home quickly. New York City, Brooklyn, Queens. The Even if we have customers in Florida and California, they get their shipments in 2 days. So
Awesome.
yeah, give us a shot, and we're very grateful if you do.
Awesome. Stephen, thank you so much.
Pleasure being with you. Thanks for your time.
You got it. And this is the Profit Express, and today's guest, Stephen Skrenta, the owner of Acabonac Farms. And what a great story, going from finance to the world of farming livestock, regenerative farming, competing against the likes of Tyson. Listen, these are the kinds of shows I love bringing to you. And quite frankly, personally, what I eat is an important thing, where the food comes from. And that's why it was a fascinating conversation with Stephen today. Hope you enjoy it. And remember to tune in each and every week. So together, today we're talking about beef and business, but every week we're talking about winning the battle for business. So until next time, this is Tim, and it's the Profit Express.